And whichever modes the subtle body is in, that's exactly how the faith is also gonna get influenced. So Prabhupada says faith is dependent on our heart. And if the heart is in mode of goodness, Prabhupada says, then our faith will also be in mode of goodness. If it's in passion, Prabhupada says, then our faith will also be in passion. If it's in ignorance, same way. In other words, the repository or the place, the residence of faith is in our heart. Okay. Heart here doesn't necessarily mean gross heart. Heart here refers to our consciousness, basically our subtle body, our mind, state of mind. So that's what here Prabhupada writes as heart means. Our faith is residing there. So depending on whatever thoughts that we cultivate, depending on whatever, we tend to think modes of activities means it's more gross. There is gross aspect also, but what is it that's driving that gross activity? It all comes from the subtle body. It all comes from our state of consciousness. So a person's modes, what you see externally is just the symptom, but the root of all those modes actually resides in our heart. So Prabhupada is saying that's where the faith is in, and that's where we should start focusing on. Okay, so everything starts with chanting. Many times we say, when we chant Hare Krishna, how is it affecting our life? This is how it affects. Nobody came and told us on each and every aspect of our life, nobody. But simply by chanting Hare Krishna, what happened? Initially our faith was in heart, and it was in each of these different modes. And we start to chant, it started to go Chetodarpan Marjan. It cleanses the heart. So naturally, once the faith is actually determined here properly, then suddenly we give up all this, and every activity, it could be food, austerity, any activity that we do in our life becomes suddenly transcendental. From being under the modes, it immediately becomes transcendental. So that's the connection there. Okay, so that's why bhakti is called as a sublime process. Sublime means, the definition that's given, usually if you take any solid, if you remember your chemistry, you take any solid, you heat, usually it becomes liquid. Correct? But there are some things which from solid goes directly to gaseous state. You can think of example, like camphor, for example, right? So this process is called sublimation. How a solid can directly become gas, it's quite hard. So same way, this analogy is given to say, so similarly, if I chant Hare Krishna, how is it going to affect my consciousness? How is it going to affect my lifestyle? Just like this is in one sense inconceivable, how a solid can directly become gas. So similarly, bhakti also is a sublime process. Bhakti is also inconceivable. It's very, very hard for us to understand how by eating, it's actually going to get affected. In Ramayana, there is a story of a Shudra by name Shambhuka. One day, Lord Ram used to have a bell outside his kingdom. Whoever wants to gain the attention of the king, they can come, ring the bell, and they'll be let in to go to Ram's assembly. And they can go tell whatever their issues are or whatever help they actually need. Immediately it will be addressed. So one day a Brahmana comes with his dead son. In Vedic times, there won't be any untimely death. If some untimely death happens, let's say if the son dies before the father, it means it's untimely. Then the father has every right to go and question the king. Why is this happening? Which means you are at fault, that's why this is happening. So there was a direct correlation between the consciousness of the king to how prosperous the kingdom is, and for that matter, how prosperous each of the citizens are. So this is how the whole flow was. So in Lord Ram's kingdom, what happens? Him, despite being the Supreme Lord, there is a situation here. Of course, he's playing the role of a normal king. So he gets knock on the door, opens, and he sees a Brahmana holding his dead son, and he's saying, how is this possible? We know that you are Maryada Purushottam. We know that you follow every rule to the dot, but still this untimely death happened. Then Lord Ram also thinks, how can this happen? Then immediately Narada Muni comes, and Narada Muni tells him, there is one Shudra by name Shambhuka. He is doing austerity in your kingdom. And that is the reason why this Brahmana son met with an untimely death. So immediately Lord Ram, he meditates. As soon as he meditates, the Pushpak Viman comes, the big flower plane. Lord Ram immediately boards there, and he goes. And true enough, he goes to south, and he comes across this particular Shudra by name Shambhuka, hanging upside down and doing tapasya, penance. And then Lord Ram goes and he asks, who are you? He says, I'm from some Shudra, which means he doesn't have any knowledge about Vedic culture at all, or Vedic knowledge, Vedic scriptures at all. He just does the tapasya, and Lord Ram asks, what's the purpose of your tapasya? Then he says, well, I want to become the next Indra. I want to defeat Indra, throw Indra out of the kingdom. That's first one. As if damage in Buloka is not enough, he wants to go to heaven also. Second point he says is, then I want to enjoy his wife Sachi. Then Lord Ram says, all right, he takes his sword and chops him off, basically. Interestingly, Lord Ram then boards the flower plane, comes back here, and Brahmana son comes alive immediately. So, Acharyas, when they actually explain this, they say that it looks like two totally unrelated activity. But how exactly going and killing somebody who shouldn't be doing an austerity aiming to become the king of heaven, how fixing one problem immediately solve the other problem? So this whole cycle of sacrifice, whole cycle of tapasya, whole cycle of penance, it's actually, there are a lot of interrelations, interdependencies between them, and there are rules and regulations that guide them, and we have to follow them strictly. Of course, we're not going to delve too much into it because we don't know. And our process is very simple, but it's good to understand that this is each one of these aspects that we actually do, each one of us for that matter. We are just a little, as they say, like a cogwheel in the proverbial work machine. That's this big machine with which this whole affairs of this material world happens, so that every system works in harmony with each other. So each one of us have to do our duty in order for the betterment of the entire system as a whole. So each one of us has a role to play. Okay, so following the scriptures, that's why it's important to understand what we are supposed to do and what we shouldn't do. So verses 1 to 7, as I said, first verse, Arjuna asked this question. Let's go to verse 2. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of three kinds: in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance. Now hear about this. As I said, this is for people who don't follow the scriptures. As soon as I said, the faith is actually residing in the heart and in the consciousness, and the consciousness is shaped by knowledge, by our intelligence, and that intelligence is shaped by scriptural knowledge, basically, from the scriptures. If somebody's faith is not based on scriptures, immediately that person's faith comes under the three modes. Okay, so that's the understanding here. So Krishna is saying, because this person is not following the scriptures, naturally his faith will be determined by whatever modes he is under. Verse 3, O son of Bharata, according to one's existence under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular faith according to the modes he has acquired. Verse 4, men in mode of goodness worship demigods, those in mode of passion worship demons, and those in mode of ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. So men in mode of goodness, they worship demigods, passion, and ignorance. Those who are in passion, who do they worship? Yes, ghosts and it's actually, sorry, what? Yeah.
What's the difference between demons and ghosts?
I'll come there. So there is those in mode of goodness, they worship demigods. Those in mode of passion, they worship demons. And those in mode of ignorance, ghosts and spirits. Prabhupada says goodness, pretty straightforward. People go do some yajna to worship Indra, Chandra, each one of them. Prabhupada also touches on Panchopasana. There are 5 demigods that are actually, or 5 gods that are given as, generally it comes under the Vedic scriptures, so they follow each one of them. And Prabhupada says usually they worship, one is Vishnu himself, which is Supreme Lord. No problem at all. Then is Surya. Then you have Shiva, Durga, and Ganesh. Pancha Upasana. Pancha is 5, Upasana is worship, worshipping all 5 of them. This is just in general, but those in mode of goodness, they can worship one of the 330 million demigods, basically. So that's in mode of goodness. In Passion, Prabhupada gives an example of somebody in Kolkata who worshipped Hitler during the World War. Because of the war scenario, he somehow made a lot of money. So for him, Hitler is the god, so he was worshipping. So Prabhupada is saying he worshipped a demon. Now, those in mode of ignorance, there are ghosts and spirits. Ghosts means, Prabhupada explains in Srimad Bhagavatam, if a person, let's say, commits suicide, usually we are, if you look at our whole constitution, we have 3 aspects. One is the soul. Second is the subtle body. the mind, intelligence, and ego. And the third is the gross body. Okay, soul we all know, that is us. Subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, and ego. Gross body is made of Panchabhuta, okay? So earth, water, fire, air, ether, and everything. So this is complete human. Soul and subtle body alone, if a person has, he is ghost. Technically, it's called Bhuta. And Prabhupada says, usually if a person commits suicide, when they die, they give up the gross body, but as a punishment, they are not given the next gross body. Even though their whole experience will still actually have the whole lifetime in the body of a ghost, they'll go through the same emotions. They'll still feel hunger, they'll still feel thirsty, but they can't eat because they don't have anything gross. So, very pathetic situation. So that's ghostly beings. So Prabhupada says, when somebody commits suicide, in their next body, they'll only have, or rather, their next gross body will be put on hold. They'll have only soul and subtle body, but they'll still feel hungry. They'll still feel thirsty, but they can't eat anything. So that's the punishment for them. So that is Bhuta. Now there is another category called Preta. That's the spirit. Preta means if you die. I'll rub this off. When a person dies, what happens is, obviously the gross body goes away. So you still have soul and the subtle body. In Vedic culture, 13th day is important. After a person dies. And this is why, let's say a person dies. The actual day of death, that's the first day. So a person, at this point of time when he dies, he'll have only soul plus subtle body. Okay. Now it's only on the 13th day he'll be given the next gross body. What happens during this duration? He's given a transition body, actually. So that's called as the Preta. That's like a temporary body. Soul, subtle body, and the transition body put together, they are called Preta. Okay? So, Bhuta means somebody who is going to live in just the soul and the subtle body for a long time. So, that's Bhuta. Preta is, this is the journey which everyone goes through, except Hare Krishnas, except those who are on path of transcendence. Whatever we study here, it's not for devotees. This is for non-devotees, generally. Not generally, always. It's for non-devotees. If a person dies, that day is actually calculated as the first day. It's only on the 13th day the person will be, his karma and everything will be taken care, and then he'll be then decided what body he has to go through. Now, during this day, this person would still have, again, that's why they would do what they called as the Pindadana. They still offer food to the departed soul. They still offer water to the departed soul, because the soul, which has actually departed, it has the subtle body, it has the transition body, but suddenly he will also feel thirsty, he'll also feel hungry, everything. So the subtle body also, or rather the transition body also grows during this time. It's like having a body, but there is no means to quench your thirst, there is no means to quench your hunger, basically. So that's why during this time, if you go by the Vedic culture, that's when they'll actually offer Pinda. Pinda is the food that's offered to the departed soul. Now, if you offer prasad, then it can alter the karma of the person on the 13th day. You can even liberate a person during this time. That's why prasad is very, very important during this time also. Okay, so this is Preta. So the person during the 13th day, after death, that status is called Preta. On the 13th day, if the person is properly offered, like food, water, and everything, the Preta will become like Pitraloka. He can acquire enough credit to actually go to a Pitraloka. Pitraloka is one of the heavenly kingdoms, but not as good as where Lord Indra is. It's like a low-level heavenly kingdom, you can say. Okay, so that's why the Pindadana is actually important. Anyone in Vedic culture, even if you go in Hindu tradition also they do, but this is the idea. So this Preta is the spirit. So that's the difference between ghost and spirit. Ghost is only soul and the subtle body, whereas spirit means it's soul, subtle body, as well as the transition body.
So my question is like, I may not fully go to, pure devotee. So what happens like?
You tell me, based on your knowledge in scriptures, what will happen to them? What did we study for unsuccessful person?
We still take birth in another Brahmana and other family, but what happens after the 13th day? Like,
No, we don't even wait for 13th day. Devotees. Yeah, so that's why I said this whole process is only for people who don't chant holy name even once in their life. It's not for people who haven't even taken prasad once, who hasn't come to 180 North Sydney, 180 Falcon Street, North Sydney, who hasn't even... That's why being devotees, it's very important for us to have a presence. Even if somebody looks at devotees, he takes a spiritual credit for that. One way, shape, form or the other, if somehow someone gets connected, they can actually skip this whole cycle.
So what happens if you skip the whole cycle for devotees?
Devotees, as soon as first day finishes, they go take birth in another Vaishnava family. So that's why this whole thing doesn't... Yamaraj won't even see them. Yamadutas can't even see devotees, actually. There is a story in the scriptures. We are digressing slightly, but I quickly... we haven't gone to the actual topic yet. So in scriptures, Puranas, there is a story of Yamaraj actually telling one day to the Yamadutas to go and fetch a particular person in a house. So they go there. They try to see a house in the address which he has actually given. They go there, they don't see any house there at all. So then they say, anyway, we have come all the way, might as well get the neighbor. So they go to the neighbor, grab the person and they go. And when Yamaraj sees that body, he says, like, why did you bring him? I told this particular guy. He says, like, no, there's no house. Then Yamaraj comes, and when he sees, he laughs. Because in the front of the house, there is a tulsi tree. Tulsi actually creates an aura for subtle entities not even able to see. So if ghosts come this side, they can't even see us. They can't even see 180 Falcon Street, actually speaking. So what? We have a lot of tulsi. So what happens is, so then Yamaraj actually tells, then he glorifies about Tulsi Marani. Interestingly, even there are, in Padma Puran, there's a whole chapter about Amlaki also. Okay, gooseberry. That is also, that's the first fruit with which Lord Brahma created. It also has its spiritual benefit, actually. So, point is that anybody who somehow or other comes in contact with the devotees, they don't need to go through this. They immediately get their spiritual journey starts straight away. We have to move. I know hands going up. Let's go to that chapter first. It's just one slide topic that's there. I just thought, because the question usually we think, what is Bhuta, what is Preta? I just thought I'll elaborate on that. Okay, verse 5 to 6. So men in mode of goodness, as we can see, their worship is also determined based on the modes that they are in. Okay, verse 6. Those who undergo severe austerities and penances not recommended in the scriptures, performing them out of pride and egoism, who are impelled by lust and attachment, who are foolish and who torture the material elements of the body as well as the supersoul dwelling within, are known to be as demons. So now here, Krishna is actually saying a general definition for something in mode of goodness means the person will be detached from the results, detached from the fruits. Generally, the sign that somebody is doing any activity or anything, his disposition is in mode of goodness means he'll be free from desires. It will be detached. So this is just a universal principle for each one of those categories, like food, charity, austerity, everything. They'll be detached from results. Now, those in mode of passion, they'll be driven by desire, which means they'll be attached to fruits. Those in mode of ignorance, because their activities are abominable to start with, they will actually end up in destruction only, both for them as well as for the people around them. Okay, so this is the underlying principle which you can apply for all the three. You can apply for food, you can apply for yajna, which is sacrifice, dana, charity, or tapa, austerity. The underlying principle for each one of them is, those in mode of goodness, Prabhupada says, it's detached. Passion, Prabhupada gives a general definition. When you get attached to something more than what is necessary, Prabhupada says that leads to passion. Ignorance, the same thing, because from start to end, it's a problem for those who are doing ignorant activities. And Prabhupada says in modern materialistic world, most of the activities that's done is in mode of goodness. Prabhupada says nuclear bombs, for example. It creates to, who does it create any good for? Like, practically for everyone it's destruction, both for the guy, because if a person drops a bomb, he's also going to die. It's not just the other person. So everyone will die. So it starts with the destruction and ends with destruction. So Prabhupada says that's mode of ignorance. So in verse 7, Krishna is just going to highlight, even the food each person prefers is of three kinds. According to the three modes of material nature, the same is true for sacrifices, austerity, and charity. This is just a prelude for the rest of the chapter. Now, here of the distinction between them. So the next three verses, 8, 9, and 10, Krishna is going to talk about food. Foods dear to those in mode of goodness increase the duration of life, purify one's existence, gives strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. Those in mode of passion, Krishna gives the description as something which is fried, something which increases passion, may not be naturally desirable. And food in mode of ignorance, Prabhupada actually says, something which is putrid, decomposed, something which is cooked long, long ago. But Prabhupada says prasadam is always an exception. Now, Prabhupada, he gives, quoting Ayurveda, generally food means when we consume food, Prabhupada says only 50% we should actually consume. When you keep eating, the first time you get a belch, that's the indication that 50% of your stomach is full. And Prabhupada says next to 25% will be filled with water. So this is for our stomach. And this is what Ayurveda says. 50% only should be filled with food, 25% water, and 25% empty, which is air. So when you eat, if you want to know how much you can eat, usually what our desire, generally our mind actually says you can eat more. So first you make a plate, and you can eat only half of that. If you really want to know how much you can eat, that's how much you can eat. So when you keep eating, first time when you actually get the belch, that's the indication 50% is full. Technically, we need to stop. With that, you gauge how much you can eat. Okay, and then 25% water, and then 25% has to be left empty. So Prabhupada says this is the ideal composition or ideal proportion with which we should actually eat the food. So Krishna is saying not just in terms of the nature of the food, Prabhupada is actually extending to say how much we should eat also, basically. If you hear the lectures, Prabhupada quotes this often. Prabhupada says there are two mistakes which people do when they eat. Eating more and eating less. And Prabhupada says, if you are young, do the mistake of eating more. If you are old, do the mistake of eating less. So when in doubt, make no mistake, you are overeating already. So just to stop it and reduce, but that's the general guideline Prabhupada quotes from Ayurveda. So foods that are too bitter, this is verse 9. Too sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning are dear to those in mode of passion. Such foods cause distress, misery, and disease. So first Krishna gives the nature of the food, then he gives the effect of consuming such food. So if you look at verse 8, Krishna says the effect of eating food in mode of goodness is they are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. Naturally desirable. Okay, when you know what we are talking about, right? Like you bring food which is like liked by practically everyone, naturally liked by everyone. That's in mode of goodness. Food in mode of passion means only some would like and some won't like. Can you get a Bhagavad Gita from there? It's there. So food in mode of passion, only some people will actually desire. Food in mode of ignorance, very, very few would actually, Maria. Food in mode of ignorance, only very, very few would like, others won't. Okay, so that's in mode of ignorance. So verse 10 speaks about food in mode of ignorance. Foods prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten, food that is tasteless, decomposed, putrid, and food consisting of remnants and untouchable things is dear to those in mode of darkness. And Prabhupada goes in detail to actually explain about eating meat. Eating meat is actually not at all required, and Prabhupada says fat, the natural fat you actually get by drinking milk itself. So Prabhupada says simply by taking milk, all our fat requirements of our body is taken care. There is no need to eat meat at all. So Prabhupada explains that in detail. So this is about food, 8 to 10. 11 to 13, Krishna is going to talk about yajna or sacrifice. Sacrifice also can be in 3 types: mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And Prabhupada explains what's the characteristic. As I said, the most defining quality in mode of goodness of anything is detached. You do a sacrifice as a matter of duty. That's it. It's very easy. Passion, you are result driven, so you do it with attachment to the result. And ignorance means, as we said, people don't know what to do and what not to do. They'll end up doing always the wrong thing, causing about a destructive effect both for them as well as for other people. So that's like the general underlying theme in each one of these. We can quickly go through of sacrifices. That which is performed according to the directions of the scripture as a matter of duty by those who desire no reward is of the nature of goodness. Now, this cycle of sacrifice we studied even in 3rd chapter, Annat Bhavanti Bhutani, Parjanyat Anna Sambhava, Yagyat Bhavati Parjanya, Yagya Karma Samudbhava. Generally, this whole world, it's about giving and taking only. Like, everyone is actually interdependent on people. So Krishna says every living entity in this world is dependent on grain. Prabhupada also writes in the purport that if a person says, no, I'm non-vegetarian, I eat only animals, even animals depend on grain only. So even animals, and for that matter, everyone is either directly or indirectly dependent on grain. Grain comes from rain comes from sacrifice. So when there is this whole cycle that's happening, first Krishna gives to demigods gives rain to us. We then, what do? We then go and worship Krishna, then the whole cycle gets complete. But if at some point, if somebody just stops, and he stops offering to the Supreme Lord, Prabhupada says he verily eats only sins, if you remember. Okay, so in 3rd chapter, Prabhupada actually explains that. So this cycle of sacrifice is actually required so that the natural harmony of this world is maintained. So everyone takes something, uses whatever they actually want, whatever remaining or whatever in excess, they give it to the other person. That's how. That's why that lifestyle is considered Brahminical. Brahmanas, whatever wealth they get, they can spend in their sacrifice whatever they need. However, at the end of the day, they should give everything in charity also. One of the duty of Brahmanas is Patan Patan Yajan Yajan Dana Pratigraha. Patan Patan means he should study scriptures, he should teach the scriptures, he or she. Patan Patan Yajan Yajan, he should do sacrifice, he should teach others also to do sacrifice. Dana Pratigraha. Dana means he can accept charity, he is supposed to give also in charity. The difference between him giving charity and Kshatriyas giving charity is, he first begs, he uses whatever excess he gives. Kshatriyas don't beg, they just go take. Okay, generally, in Vedic times, 1/6 of everything actually goes to the king. So, Brahmanas means whatever that you have, you spend at the end of the day and you give. They should have zero bank balance, which means at the start of the day, every single day in their life, they will start as a pauper only. That way, they'll be completely dependent on the Supreme Lord. That's the idea. Okay, so everything is actually dependent. So even Brahmanas, people who are actually given to actually accept charity, even they are supposed to actually pass it on. So the cycle should not stop. That's the idea here. So everyone takes from somebody, gives it to somebody. And the next person also takes it from somebody, gives it to somebody. So this whole cycle keeps on continuing. Then Krishna says, yes, then the whole world will actually happen in harmony. So when Brahma created this world, he said, sacrifice. This is the prime duty of everyone. May all flourish and may all live with this principle of sacrifice. Now, when we chant Hare Krishna, Prabhupada, as much as he explains about sacrifice, Prabhupada also says, simply chant Hare Krishna, everything will be taken care. Chanting Hare Krishna, the whole point of sacrifice is to please the Supreme Lord. If simply by chanting the holy name, Krishna says, I'm satisfied, what's our problem? So simply we just chant, everything else will be taken care automatically. We don't need to bother. Okay, but in general ecosystem, this is how it actually works. Whatever we take, we use whatever we have, anything in physical sense. You use how much ever you want and you pass it on to the next person. Other person also takes something, uses and he passes it on. So there is a whole harmony. That's how this whole cycle is actually explained, cycle of sacrifice. So this one is very, very important. Now in contemporary sense, people just discover their own speculated ideas of sacrifice. If you go to South India, there are many people who go to even Balaji temple, even thieves it's mentioned. They go and they strike a deal with the Supreme Lord also, again concocted. Okay, whatever I steal, 50% goes to you. They do. And they come and they also donate, true to their words, to continue their business actually. And sometimes people cheat also actually. Like, there is one story of two people, they go to a demigod, two thieves. And they strike a deal with the Lord Ganesh and say, okay, whatever we steal, we'll give you a share. So they go steal. So first these two thieves, they divide whatever they have plundered into two parts. So the first thief goes in front of Lord Ganesh and he says, oh, Supreme Lord, you gave me, but this is how they worship. Whatever you have given, I'll be true to my word, so I'm going to give you a share. So then he draws a small circle on the floor. And he says, I'm going to throw everything up. Whatever that falls in this big circle, I give it to you. Whatever that falls outside, I'll take away. So then he throws, only one coin falls there, he gives it. See, I'm true to my word, he does. Second guy is even more ignorant. So he comes, or rather passionate. He comes to the Supreme Lord, and Lord Ganesh in this case, and he says, Lord, like my comrade, I don't want to limit you to that small circle. What I'm going to do, I'm going to throw everything up. Whatever you want, catch. Whatever that falls down, I'll take. So he throws, everything falls, he just takes it. So Prabhupada says all of these concocted sacrifices, all of these concocted approaches, none of them are authorized. Because neither are they benefited, nor are the other people benefited. Prabhupada says in India, in politicians, they do fasting. Till date, they do fasting. Prabhupada says it's totally in mode of ignorance. Because first of all, it's not authorized by the scriptures. And second, there's no end result for that. They are just disturbing their own bodily system, abusing it, literally. We don't have any right, because the whole body belongs to the Supreme Lord. It is supposed to be engaged in His service. So we have no right at all to abuse this body, to torture this body. So anything in mode of ignorance, it actually always ends up with torturing ourselves only. Torturing one's own self, torturing people around them also. So these are sacrifices in three modes. So in verse 11, he says, of sacrifices, the sacrifice performed according to the directions of the scripture as a matter of duty by those who desire no reward is of the nature of goodness. 12, sacrifice performed for some material benefit or for the sake of pride. That also people do. People do for the sake of ego, for the sake of advertisement. See how pious I am, how great punyavan I am. So they are all in mode of passion. Verse 13, any sacrifice performed without regard for directions of the scripture, without a distribution of prasadam. Now this verse is a good indicator for us to understand what are the different aspects in sacrifice. Primarily four, Prabhupada touches on fifth aspect also. First thing is, if you read this verse carefully, verse 13, it says, first of all, it should, any sacrifice, the converse is also true. Ignorant people ignore all the five, which means all the five aspects are also true for any sacrifice. It should be in accordance with the scripture. Mantras should be chanted. Food should be distributed. Remuneration to the priest has to be there. So if you read this verse, Prabhupada actually touches on all of them. Performed without regard for directions of scripture, distribution of prasadam, chanting of Vedic hymns, and remunerations to the priest. Fifth aspect is the faith, which is more subtle, but these are the four main things. Any yagya, even if you do yagya in your home, even being devotees, as a principle, you should give some remuneration to the priest. Otherwise, rule is that if you invite a priest to your home, he does a yagya, you don't give anything as a remuneration, then the priest will actually take the benefit of doing the whole yagya, which technically means you may buy all the ingredients, everything, but then he will come, do the whole thing, he'll take the benefit and he'll go. Same way, even if you build a temple, if you bring a priest, you actually get the priest to do the yagya. If you don't give it, so the idea is you make it more like a business transaction. For that reason only it's mentioned, even when you give beads, chanting beads. When you give chanting beads to somebody, in one sense, we are acting as a Siksha Guru in one level. Okay? So if we give chanting beads to the person, there is a possibility of the person's karma to come and affect us. That's why we don't give beads alone for free. Prasadam we give free, books we can give for free. Beads alone, we need to make it as a transaction. You can get even 5 cents, no problem. Or you can mention some nominal amount. That's why beads alone, we don't usually give for free. Okay? Subtle things, good to follow. So same way when you do yagya, could be anything, garbhadana samskar, any yagya, anything for that matter, you actually do. A token remuneration has to be given to the priest. Otherwise, the priest will come, he'll do the yagya and he'll take the benefit. You won't. Okay, so these are the four aspects. It has to be in accordance with the scriptures. Obviously, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra has to be chanted during the yagya. Prasadam has to be distributed. Remuneration has to be given. Okay, so this is the proper way of doing any yagya. Obviously, all of them should be driven based on the faith, based on the level of consciousness. Verse 12, but the sacrifice performed for some material benefit or for the sake of pride, O chief of Bharatas, you should know to be in mode of passion. Ignorance, Without any regard, we saw that. Okay, so now 14 to 19. Krishna is going to speak about austerities. As we said, Krishna first defines what are the different types of austerities. So Krishna says austerities has to be performed with body, speech, and mind. Okay, those with body, Prabhupada says offering respects to brahmanas, elders, paying obeisances to spiritual master, everything. They come under austerities of the body. You come to the temple, you pay obeisances, or whenever you see a brahmana, you see somebody, this is an austerity. Sometimes you pay obeisances, it's an austerity. Knee pains, your whole body sometimes says, hey, don't do it. Everything still you have to do. So even when you come to temple, first we bow down to show respects to all the devotees here. Then we bow down to our spiritual master Prabhupada. Then we come, bow down to Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, and we follow the same etiquette when we go out. It's an austerity of the body. So each one of them, Prabhupada says that's austerity. Austerity of speech, satyam, hitam and priyam. Satyam means it should be truthful. Satyam, hitam. Hitam means it should be beneficial. And then truthful, priyam, it should be pleasing. So there are three aspects which Krishna says. So it should be truthful, beneficial, and it should be pleasing. Okay, mind. Interestingly, if you read the attributes for the austerities of mind, it's interesting. So if you go to verse 16, satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of existence are the austerities of the mind. So satisfaction is, in one sense, it's an emotion, what you feel. Like, you eat something, you feel happiness. That's the satisfaction. Satisfaction also can be choice. For example, let us say you have only X amount of wealth and your neighbor has got more. You can choose to be satisfied or you can choose to be anxious. Why am I not getting more? So satisfaction is both an emotion. You can also say it's like your choice. It's a state of mind, but you can choose to have that state of mind also. So that's the satisfaction. Simplicity, same way. Simplicity, we tend to think, simplicity means you live simply, your clothes has to be simple, your house has to be simple like that. But here, simplicity is actually given as an austerity of the mind again. We should not be complicated. We should simply follow rules, regulations that's given in the scriptures, lead our life in a simple, straightforward way. Prabhupada says that is simplicity of the mind. Self-control, come straightforward, and purification of one's existence or the austerities of the mind. So this is for the mind. Otherwise, mind always have this tendency to always demand things which we don't have, always. Mind will always goes through these two emotions, hankering and fear. Fear is of losing something, hankering is for something you don't have also. So if you have something, mind is going to feel fearful. Why? I'm going to lose it anytime. Correct? And if you don't have something, mind is going to hanker again. So you give, you are doomed. Don't give also, you are doomed. That's the problem. So that's why self-control. If we simply go with understanding how much do I need, how much is actually authorized in the scriptures, I simply hold to that. Prabhupada says that is austerity of the mind. Okay, yes, you have to give up something when we have to lead a simple lifestyle, but then that's why it's austerity. That's why it's a sacrifice. Okay, so if we simply follow this path as given by Krishna, because more we delve on materialistic things, more our consciousness is going to get affected. Usually one question I get asked more is by devotees. More is, Prabhu, is it okay for me to take a slight detour from my path of devotion to go earn more money and then I'll come back, I'll be happy for the rest of the life? How many of you thought like that? Okay, all of us think like that at some point. But the problem with that approach is that we can die anytime. That's one thing. Second, the more we deal with the material energy, more we'll also get conditioned. That's again another problem. Because we will think for us to even break our lifelong habits, when we come to Krishna consciousness, to give up meat eating, intoxication, gambling, that itself took a certain bit of effort for us to give that up and to come. Now we are in a position wherein we have positively conditioned ourselves. We can keep our life simple and maintain it this way. But then the very same thing we gave up, mind will always tempt us. No, before you didn't know how to engage wealth. Come on, how many of your mind said like that? My mind said like that when I was working. Now you can go back, earn, so that you can engage it properly. But the point which mind will not allow us to actually see is, once you go there, you will get conditioned again. So it will be same, you have to go back again to the first gear. Many times, we have seen, unfortunately, cases of devotees actually thinking like that going, and they never came back. Even initiated devotees. So it's a problem for us to not go to that extreme. It's very easy if we simply follow, we'll be studying in Nectar of Instruction, if we simply follow the guidance that's given by Rupa Goswami. Simply do how much ever that is helping you in your progress in Krishna consciousness, continue to do. Whatever that you see as detrimental, just let it go. It's okay. It's temporary anyway. Just let it go. Okay? We are with Krishna. Krishna will take care of everything. There will never be any problem with the food, shelter, clothing, everything. Even for our basic, any other amenities, whatever that we actually need, Krishna will provide. We don't need to bother so much. But for us to make this choice of giving up Krishna consciousness, compromising on our devotional service to go for something outside materialistic, thinking that I will actually go earn for some time and then I'll come back, that tendency comes under mode of passion. So it can lead to ignorance only. To raising it to mode of goodness, it's a problem. Because mode of goodness means satisfaction. Tushtamana. Just to keep it happy. Whatever that we have, that's why satisfaction is a state of mind. Satisfaction is also a choice. We can choose to be satisfied or we don't have to be. If you take Hiranyakashipu, for example, whole world were following him. They were bowing down. Even Narada Muni used to offer respects simply because he wanted to pacify him so that he would be a little soft when it comes to dealing with the devotees. He had a lot of respect for Narada Muni because first of all, he saved his wife, Kayadu. So even Narada Muni was sometimes used to offer pranam to Hiranyakashipu. So whole world was following him, bowing down to him, taking shelter of him, worshipping him. He could have chosen to just ignore his son, and he has this little 5-year-old boy who says, I don't follow you, only Vishnu. If you read the verses in Srimad Bhagavatam, he says, oh, best of the asuras, like that he sings. Like that he says, Asura Varya. Varya means best. So, Asura Varya Dehinam. So, he says, oh, best of the asuras, like that he says. He could have chosen to be satisfied. He could have still kept his son, allowing him, giving him space. Okay, you want to worship Vishnu? You worship, no problem. He could have been satisfied with, okay, rest of the world is following me. Everyone followed him, but his focus was simply on Prahlad Maharaj. He forgot about the rest of the world following him. All he was worried about was, why is this single boy not following me? Okay, and he plotted his downfall because he just focused on things which he didn't have. So even that sense also, Hiranyakashipu didn't manage his life properly. So we can take lessons, but here austerity of the mind, Prabhupada also says, speech also, mauna, it's given. To keep quiet, that's also in one sense an austerity of the mind. We would tend to think mauna means just we don't speak. But speech is just an expression of our thoughts. So Prabhupada says a positive way of looking at mauna means to engage 24/7 in glorifying the Supreme Lord. So rather than stop talking nonsense, we can glorify the Supreme Lord. That's a proper engagement. Just like a little child, if you ask the little child to keep quiet, you will have trouble. You give something to play with, some engagement for the child is happy to be engaged. So same way, if we get our mind to be engaged in the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord in devotional service, everyone will be happy. So here the austerities of the mind. First, Krishna defines the austerities of each of these three. Now he'll tell us the symptoms in each of these modes. Great men think alike. Okay, great women think alike. Okay, gravity means there is a certain level of seriousness. Once they asked Prabhupada this question, I think in Perth, Swamiji, why are you so quiet? Why do you look very grave? Prabhupada said, when we understand we are dealing with the Supreme Lord, He's so big, I'm so tiny. So naturally, I can't help but be grave. But Prabhupada says, but I'm happy, and Prabhupada gives this big oceanic smile, actually. So gravity here refers to that mind always comes up with all these whimsical thoughts, tend to gossip, tend to focus on things which are more playful, frivolous. Gravity means to stay focused on activities which are more productive, which are more conducive for our cultivation of Krishna consciousness. That's gravity. Grave doesn't mean you look serious. Okay, not too serious, not in that sense. Gravity here means do useful things, don't do useless things. That's what gravity here refers to. Okay? And as with everything, it starts with the consciousness, with the state of mind, so it comes under austerities of the mind. So after defining what of these three austerities of body, speech, and mind, Krishna will touch on the nature in each of these three modes. So we have verse 17, this threefold austerity, which means austerity of Deha, Vak, Buddhi, body, mind, and speech, performed with the transcendental faith by men not expecting material benefits. Again, same principle, be detached. But engaged only for the sake of supreme is called austerity in goodness. This is verse 17. 18, penance performed out of pride and for the sake of gaining respect, honor, and worship is said to be in the mode of passion. It is neither stable nor permanent. Verse 19, penance performed out of foolishness with self-torture or to destroy or injure others, it is said to be in mode of ignorance. Okay, so the underlying principle is the same. Okay, verse 20 to 22, it talks about charity. Prabhupada writes in Srimad Bhagavatam how charity works. Okay, if you give money to a person or any wealth to a person, someone who is not qualified, let's say someone who is a non-Brahmana, if you give some money to the person and you are taking birth again, you will get the same amount in return, either in this life or the next life. So whatever money you give, this is totally outside of Krishna consciousness. You just give money to somebody, the karmic reaction is that money will come back to you. Even if somebody who is a non-qualified person, you will get whatever you give in the same proportion. If you give something to somebody who is an half-qualified Brahmana, Prabhupada writes like that, then you get double the amount. Okay? You give 100 gold coins, you get 200 gold coins. If you give it to a qualified Brahmana, Prabhupada says 100 or 1,000 times multiplied you will get. If you give something in charity to a Brahmana, it will come back to you 1,000 times multiplied. However, if you give it to devotees, technically Veda Paraga means one who has realized the Vedas. Vedascha sarver aham eva vedyo. You should understand me through the Vedas, Krishna says. The devotees don't just understand Krishna, they go and serve Krishna also. So Veda Paraga means it comes back to them unlimited. Unlimited means there is no end. So anybody who gives anything to Krishna or Krishna's devotees, they'll never, their wealth will never get reduced. It will only keep on multiplying unlimitedly. It's in Srimad Bhagavatam. So basically, this is how charity works, technically. Anything you give it to an unqualified person, it will come back to you in the same amount as part of your karmic benefit. If you give it to even a half-qualified Brahmana, you will get 2 times whatever you have given. If you give it to a fully qualified Brahmana, you will get it multiplied 1,000 times. If you give it to Veda Paraga or devotees, practically there is no end. You will keep on getting unlimitedly. Okay, so that's why charity even inside Krishna consciousness is very important. That's why whenever we ask, Prabhupada says, these people are so fallen, if we tell them to give, they won't give. So we have to go and beg. So, but Prabhupada says, but we are not beggars, okay? Krishna's devotees, their father is the Supreme Lord, husband of Goddess of Fortune. So they are the richest sons. One day Prabhupada walks and they ask, Prabhupada, somebody is actually telling we don't work. Yes, our father is Krishna, why should we work? One of Prabhupada's famous retorts. Another time, Prabhupada builds this big compound around a temple and Prabhupada goes out for working. I think it's either Vrindavan or Juhu, Vrindavan. So when Prabhupada comes out, then one person just makes a sarcastic remark saying, oh Swamiji, this looks like a prison. Prabhupada says, yes, prison is outside, not inside. Okay, so temple is the spiritual embassy. Prabhupada is saying, yeah, prison is outside. So Prabhupada says like that. So whatever donation, whatever charity that's given to Krishna, it comes back to them in unlimited ways. Okay, so that's why Prabhupada says, if we ask people to give, they don't give. So what we have to do, we have to please go and tell, oh, please, we don't have any money like that. So at least we evoke that natural compassion on people, so they will actually give. But in return, they are going to get unlimited benefits back.
Is that in the next life or is that in the current life?
Both in this as well as the next. That's why I said that karmic reaction can happen this life or in the next. Okay? So this charity also can be given under 3 modes. So Krishna, that's what he explains in verse 22. Charity given out of duty, without expectation of return, at a proper time and place. Kala desha patra, time, place, and circumstance. To a worthy person is considered to be in mode of goodness. General tendency is, we think, oh, that Brahmana is rich, why should I give? But that's not, in Vedic sense, that's not how you actually see. You go based on qualification. What is that person's state of consciousness? If I give an X amount, will he be engaged? Then that person will properly engage it in Krishna service in a proper way. Then we can actually give. But if you go to a person who you give charity to, and the person takes the charity amount and he goes and, let's say, indulges in some intoxication, we also need to take the benefit. Karmic benefit, in which case, this is a papa, this is a sinful reaction. So we have to be very, very careful. Okay, but charity performed with the expectation of some return, or with the desire for fruitive results, or in a grudging mood. Have you come across? Grudgingly giving. They're all in mode of passion. Is said to be in charity in mode of passion. And 22, and charity performed at an impure place, at an improper time, to unworthy persons, or without proper attention and respect, is said to be in mode of ignorance. Ignorance, you can always negate everything in mode of goodness. Okay, you do it based on scripture, no scripture. You do it with respect, no respect. So understand ignorance is easy. It's exactly the other end of the pole. Okay, so this is verse 22. 23 to 28. Now Krishna, after speaking about these different symptoms in each of these different activities, Krishna is now going to say the solution. Because Arjuna asked this question, these people don't have faith in scripture. Krishna says, okay, fine. So now Krishna then elaborates what are the different categories these people fall under, how you can study their characteristics, how you can understand which mode they are in and everything. Okay, so that's why he picked on food, charity, yajna, dana, tapa, everything, sacrifice, austerity, everything. Now Krishna, after telling this is the beauty of scriptures. Scriptures don't just tell you what the problem is. They just don't analyze what the problem is. They'll also give the solution. So Krishna is saying, if you look at the analysis, there are people who are totally materialistic, which means faithless. Slightly higher than that is people who have non-scriptural faith. Okay, that's the category we saw in this chapter. Above than that is people who are in scriptural faith. Now, if a person worships a demigod, and it says, if you do 100 Ashwamedha Yajna, you do that so that you can become Indra, and the person does Ashwamedha Yajna and he becomes Indra, that is a scriptural faith. Scriptures not just to talk on transcendence, it also talks on material benefits also, Karma Kanda section, basically. So higher than scriptural faith is the transcendental faith, which means that part of the scriptures that teaches us how to go back to Krishna. That's a transcendental faith. So even in faith, Krishna actually puts it in 4 categories. This is people who don't have any faith at all. Somehow they come in contact, or somehow they even by tradition, culture, okay, or by prodding encouragement by their parents, somebody, they actually start to do some pious activity, they'll come under this category, and this is when they come in one of the modes. Okay, now from here, so verse 23 to 28 talks about how that transition happened from here to here and then here to here, eventually. So verse 23 to 28 is talking about these 3. Okay, this chapter spoke about people with non-scriptural faith. Now, how can we make their faith get elevated to the next level, which is scriptural faith, and how from that point to transcendental faith? So that's what this section speaks about. In nutshell, this section actually says that simply by chanting Om, Tat, Sat. Prabhupada explains in the purports, you can actually go through that. So Om, Tat, Sat, there are 3 names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so that's one definition Prabhupada gives. There are 3 names, 3 ways of addressing the Supreme Absolute Truth. Om here refers to, Prabhupada says, at the start of any activity, if you actually do Om, by saying Om, what we actually in effect mean is, I offer everything to the Supreme Lord Vishnu. That's what it means. My supreme destination is Vishnu. I'm going to Vishnu. If a person chants Om, that's what it means. But people won't realize the meaning. If you read these verses, Krishna explains, Prabhupada also elaborates that in the purport. So that's Om. Okay? Tat here refers to. So Om, if a person chants Om, it means I accept Vishnu as the supreme destination and I aim, that's my supreme goal and that's what I'm actually intending this activity to go for. That's why Prabhupada explains in the purport, any Vedic ritual, Prabhupada says any initiation, Upanayana, anything, it will always start with Om. Okay, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Narayana, anything. Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam, even Rigveda also speaks about that. Okay, Om Shuklam Bharadaram Vishnu, even Vishnu. Everything starts with Om. When we say Om, it means I accept Vishnu as the Supreme Lord. Now a person may not realize, but it's too late. So that's what, whenever anybody, if you see the universal application of Om, you ask anyone, even people coming from non-Indian background, have you heard of Om? They say, yeah, I have heard. Have you come across? But when they say Om, simply they are chanting the holy name. It's a non-personal way of addressing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's still Krishna. Pranava sarva vedeshu. Brahmano hiya pratistaham. Krishna said in 14th chapter, Amritasya Vyasya. 14th chapter, last verse, that's how it finishes. I'm the basis of impersonal Brahman. So if somebody even chants Om, it's too late. They are already going towards this path, the transcendental faith. Okay? Tat here refers to their intention. Whenever they say Tat, it means that I want to get free from material entanglement. In other words, I want liberation. That's what it means. That is Tat. That's the meaning Prabhupada actually explains. It's in the verse. You can read the verse in the purport. And Sat refers to eternal, which means Prabhupada explains any activity or anything that we do in connection to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is eternal. It's going to take us to that eternal destination. It's going to make us eternal. So that's what Sat means. So Prabhupada says, simply by somebody saying Om Tat Sat, they are in effect actually telling the supreme goal. First goal Prabhupada actually explains is that Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Second is their desire to get liberated from this world and go to that supreme goal. And third is how are they going to do? By doing devotional service, they can also engage in the eternal loving service of the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada, that's how he explains. If you read the purports, you will actually see. So Om Tat Sat, that's a starting level. Prabhupada, if you see early letters, Prabhupada used to write even Om Tat Sat. Even in some books, preface, you can actually see. So any activity that you, any yagya that you do, if a person just adds as part of his activity, could be in mode of ignorance, passion, goodness, doesn't matter. With faith, without faith, doesn't matter. Just say Om Tat Sat. Now, most of the people wouldn't have any problem with that, actually. Even people may say that to show off also. See, I know something in Sanskrit. Even that much if they say, their faith will slowly progress to come and take shelter of scriptures. That may increase their curiosity. Hey, what more is there in the scriptures? And then eventually it will come to transcendental faith also. Okay, so that's how Krishna explains here, and Prabhupada winds up. Last verse speaks about those who don't have any faith at all. So that's the verse 28. Anything done as sacrifice, charity or penance without faith in the Supreme, O son of Pritha, is impermanent. It is called asat and is useless both in this life and in next. So anything which we actually do without faith, which goes to show any activity that we actually do externally, it has its effect, but something which is the decider, which is the most important ingredient in any activity that we do, could be yagya, dana, tapa, anything we actually do. What is the most defining factor in each one of them is the amount of faith that we have, where our consciousness is, for what purpose we are actually doing. That's the most important ingredient. And that's how Krishna winds up this chapter. So this chapter we actually saw how initially Arjuna asked about somebody who's doing something, he's having faith but not necessarily in accordance with the scripture. Krishna goes on to then explain about how their worship will be defined by the three modes. Such people without faith in scriptures, Krishna says immediately their faith comes under the purview of the three modes. And how we can understand where that person's faith is, that you can do by studying what type of food they eat, what type of sacrifice they do, yagya, dana, how they do charity, how they do austerity. And then Krishna also gave the solution about, after studying all this, even if a person can still actually transcend all the modes, how? Simply by saying Om Tat Sat. He doesn't even have to start, but even chanting Om is actually the name of Krishna only. Okay, Prabhupada says it's a non-personal way of addressing Krishna, but it's still Krishna only. So his faith will still slowly progress from a position where his faith is not based on scriptures. It will slowly elevate to following the scriptures, and then in the scriptures, he'll go to the Bhakti Shastra, to transcendental scripture. That's how this chapter ends. Any questions? About the ghost? I know. Okay. I think I mentioned this. One devotee told me, Prabhu, I think I saw a ghost. I said, our process is to see Krishna. Don't worry too much about seeing ghost.
My question is like related to Vikraloka and ghost. So where like I'm confused between two things.
Okay.
First is like why there are ghosts? Because as Prabhupada said, there are ghosts. Right?
Yes.
There are ghosts here also.
Well, here also, okay.
How we get into this? Because we are waiting for the.
Okay.
The second thing, my question relates to that.
Hmm.
We do Shraddha ceremony and all every year.
Yep.
So how do we identify that our ancestors have gone to Vikraloka? Because they might get a different body also. We are just feeling that different body, and then we are just creating, we are giving karmas to them. This is what, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So how do we identify? Because every year we do Shraddha ceremony. And then we are saying, because we are giving the prashadam, we offer prashadam. So obviously they will go in if they have. But in practically, they don't come here because they already are in some body, because it's been long years and things have got a different body. So how do you identify they're still in different? This is the second question.
Okay, let's go. First question. First question is, what's the difference between, okay, what are ghosts? I think I explained that. Prabhupada explains that if a person commits suicide, that's one primary cause of somebody getting ghostly body. Usually we have soul, we have subtle body, and we have gross body. When we die, we give up the gross body, we have only soul and the subtle body. Which marker was I using? It's here. Okay, so if you die, you give up the gross body, all you have is soul and subtle body. Now, technically, at the end of 13th day, you should get another body. And then gross body will be added. Ghosts means because of the type of sinful reaction the particular jiva has done, the jiva is actually deprived of a gross body and is made to suffer with just soul and subtle body only, even though he has to still go through an experience as if he has a gross body, he or she has a gross body. Okay, so there's happiness, sadness, cold, heat, everything, whatever that we experience in this gross body, hungry, thirsty, feeling boredom, everything they go through. However, being in gross body, if we are struggling, let's say you feel hungry, you can go cook something and you can eat. Because this is made of earth, water, fire, air, ether. Food is also made of that. But because they don't have earth, water, fire, air, ether component at all in these two, because one is completely subtle, mind, intelligence, and ego, and the other is soul, which is Sachidananda. So there is no earth, water, fire, air, ether. However, food which is available is in gross level only. So for them to quench their thirst, that's why they enter into someone else's body. Enter into someone else's body, usually the target will be in mode of ignorance. So for devotees, technically, ghosts can't enter. Somebody in mode of goodness, rarely it can enter. Their usual target is people who are more vulnerable, which is in mode of ignorance. So usually, ghosts will actually enter through their body. Through their body, they'll then, they have lusty desire, they'll try to fulfill that. They have hunger, they'll fulfill that. They want to enjoy something, they'll fulfill their desire through that. Okay, so that's how ghosts work. Coming to your question regarding Pitris, what's the difference between ghosts and our forefathers? Generally, the journey is that, as we said, when a person dies, that day is considered as the first day. At this stage, they have soul, subtle body, gross body will be one day before or that morning, whenever they died. So at this point, they have only soul and subtle body. But as soon as they die, they get, in addition to soul and subtle body, they get an intermediary transition body. So these three together is what we call as preta. Ghost, soul and subtle alone is called bhuta. Okay, so soul, subtle body, as well as that intermediary transition body, it's called preta. So Even as pretas, they actually have hunger, they actually have thirst, everything. So that's why food is also offered during this 13-day period. That's why this 13-day period, they actually do what they called as pindadana, because this transition body also, it's not they get a brand new body, fully fleshed body same day. Transition body also grows. So first day it will be like a baby and then it grows, just conceptually. So as you grow, obviously you'll feel more food, so then offer pindadana during that time. On the 13th day, that's when their decision on where they are really going will be determined. Now usually according to Karma Kanda, if a person comes to this stage, if the pindadana is actually offered everything properly, then that soul, along with the subtle body, will actually go to the Pitraloka. Pitraloka's king is Aryama. Now Pitraloka is in heavenly region only. So we have Bhuloka here as 7th. So this is above us only, Pitraloka. However, Indra lives somewhere in higher. It's more like Australia and some third world country. So Indra lives in the higher realm of the Swarga. This is somewhere in the lower realm. Pitraloka is somewhere in the lower realm. Now just like Indra, he can maintain his position only for 10,000 years. After that he has to die. Correct? Whereas Pitras, what happened is, when they go there, if you remember in the first chapter we saw, when Arjuna says, when the head of the family is actually killed, the offering is actually stopped, which means when these pretas acquire the Pitraloka candidacy there, when they go there, when they live, they can be maintained there by doing the Shraddha every year. I'm talking strictly Karma Kanda here. So every year, as long as you keep doing it, then they will keep on accruing more and more pious credit to be able to maintain their citizenship there. But if you kill the head of the family, now the Shraddha ceremony can't be done, which means he's going to run out, which means what will happen? From Pitraloka, he'll fall down. Technically, this is in heavenly kingdom, so he'll come back again, basically to either earthly kingdom or lower kingdom somewhere. So this is what Arjuna argued in first chapter. If I kill the head of the family, the offering for the Pitras will be stopped, which means practically every year it is supposed to be done. That will be stopped. Because of that, ancestors also will fall down. That's what it means here. Now, as I said, this whole journey is typically based on Karma Kanda only. I'm not talking devotional service here at all. In case, if a person who is actually dying, you are talking about our forefathers, right? They at least would know that you are a Hare Krishna, correct? Which means they'll never go through this journey. That's the power of devotional service. This whole thing which I actually explained now, it's simply for Karma Kandi who hasn't heard Krishna's name once, who hasn't said Krishna's name once, who didn't even accidentally take prasad. That's the journey he has to go through. Okay? We need to move to other questions. I saw some other hand. Yamaraj is in completely different category. There are 14 planetary systems. Yamaraj is the loka where they actually punish the hellish kingdoms. Hellish kingdoms is below the 14 planetary systems. It doesn't even come under the 14 planetary system.
Where can we read more about this?
Garuda Puran. This whole thing is given in Garuda Puran.
So you explained that in this whole chapter is not with respect to transcendental thing, like taking scriptures is transcendental. So, and the other thing is, general disposition of people in order of goodness is detachment. So where does that detachment come from if they are not into devotional service? And does it relate to like impersonalists and other?
Good question. How is the detachment of people in mode of goodness different to the detachment we speak about in devotional circle? The devotees, they cultivate a detachment for what? For Krishna. To increase their attachment for Krishna, they cultivate detachment. People in mode of goodness, they develop detachment. Why? Because they know if I'm attached, I'm going to suffer. So their whole drive there is not to go to Krishna, technically. Their whole drive is, if I do this, I'm going to suffer, so let me be smart here. That's all. Okay, so that's the motive why they actually cultivate all these good habits. Shuka, they want to keep it clean. Why? Otherwise, I'll have disease. Okay, I need to maintain my place clean. So the drive will always be, that's why even somebody in mode of goodness, it's still material, because there is no Krishna there yet. Whereas somebody, whatever we actually discuss in devotional life, even when we say clean, we want to keep the place clean for Krishna. Yes, there are other benefits, but primarily there is Luke, there is the place can be free of diseases and everything, but that's secondary. Primary thing is, Krishna said that. Krishna is Suchi, Krishna said this, so I'm doing it for Krishna's pleasure, that's all. So that the consciousness is completely different.
So impersonalists and other people come to say that more goodness or they're transcendental?
That depends if which impersonalist are you talking about? Okay, if you're talking about, let's say, Brahmavadis comes under transcendental. Impersonalists, they also follow the scriptures. But what scripture? That's why scripture is a very broad category. That's why we said from non-scriptural faith to scriptural faith doesn't necessarily mean it's transcendental. It's one level even higher, because scriptures also, there are karma kanda, jnana kanda, upasana kanda. Okay, so scriptural faith is a normal, broad category. Now, the impersonalists, for example, depending on where their goal is, that will actually determine whether their faith is transcendental or just scriptural. Because there are Mayavadis who very strictly do karma kanda also. Okay, how can the bhutas be liberated? Good question. Bhutas can be liberated simply by chanting. Even Bhagavata Mahatmya, if you actually read, simply wherever there's chanting of the holy name, just like, when we can send some package in courier, when we do Shraddha in ISKCON temple, that's what we mean. We can send the spiritual package to our ancestors. We can chant holy name on their behalf. We can chant extra rounds. We can sponsor the feasts, for example. You can do every activity. You can dedicate, kirtan for their behalf. You can go to place of pilgrimage, offer the benefits to them. You can do some sadhu seva, offer the benefits to them. Every spiritual activity that you do, if you want to actually offer it on behalf of your forefathers or departed soul on any particular day, it's possible. So simply by them borrowing that, they can be liberated from that. We can discuss about, there are a lot of stories actually about that. Gokaran, there are so many stories actually that talks about people who get liberated despite having a subtle body, simply by transcendental sound vibration. On Islam, with respect to being a faith path towards Almighty, okay, I'll tell you a quick anecdote. We are running out of time. Prabhupada, once he goes to Iran, I think Dayananda Prabhu and Nandarani Mataji, they were there. They were very successful in preaching. As Prabhupada was actually talking, suddenly namaz goes on. Okay, they were glorifying Allah. Prabhupada immediately closes his eyes and he keeps quiet. And then when it finishes, Prabhupada opens his eyes were like very bright, and he was telling such a nice transcendental way to glorify the Supreme Lord. And then immediately one disciple actually seated there, he actually tells Prabhupada, shouldn't we be asking them to chant Hare Krishna? Prabhupada immediately retorts, why should we be sectarian? So Prabhupada's stance was very, very clear. If somebody is not following any path at all, Prabhupada said chant Hare Krishna. But if somebody, Prabhupada says, is a proper Islamic person or proper Christian person, Prabhupada always encouraged them to go a step further. Prabhupada says, you want to know more about God, read this, so you be a better Christian, better Muslim, like that. So Prabhupada clearly says Krishna consciousness is not sectarian at all. Something that comes to my mind when I read that. Charity towards Veda Paraga have unlimited returns is in material and both. In both the senses. Okay, so you get unlimited wealth as well as you'll be getting the transcendental knowledge, both. Do family traditions like worshipping Kuladeva fall under scriptural or non-scriptural faith? Depending, I'm sorry?
What's Kuladeva?
Kuladeva is generally in Vedic tradition, every family, even in Hindu tradition you will see, every family has their own favorite god. Some worship Shiva, some worship Durga, some worship everyone. Come under scriptural or non-scriptural faith, depending on what your Kuladeva is, first of all, depending on what process you actually follow to worship that particular Kuladeva. That will determine. So to answer that question, it can be either of them, depending on how strictly you actually follow the scriptural path. If it's Shiva and you go and worship, like in some places in India, they worship Narsinghadev by killing goats, by offering blood. Total materialistic sense. So that may be Kuladevata, but completely non-scriptural. Okay? Completely in mode of ignorance, basically. That's the worship. Is worship of Kuladeva required for neophyte devotees in ISKCON? Why just neophyte devotees? Neophyte, intermediately advanced, it's not required. For us, Kuladevata, everything is Lord Krishna only. Our Gotra also is Achyuta Gotra. So simply by worshipping Krishna, we fulfill all the conditions. We don't need anything extra. Achyuta. So that's for every ISKCON devotee, or Gotra is Achyuta. Okay, we'll finish here. Lineage.